All right, everybody. The winning streak had to come to an end sometime. Certainly not the way you'd like to see it go down. A very interesting night. Part one in Atlanta. Celtics will be back there on Thursday. We're going to break it all down, tell you what happened, where it went wrong, and where we go from here. All of that coming up next here on a Green with Envy post-game special. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy, post-game style. The Boston Celtics, eventually, they had to lose one. And tonight, they lost it in pretty epic fashion, blowing a 30-point lead to the Atlanta Hawks in their first of what will be 2 games over 4 days in Atlanta. Really weird scheduling quirk for the Celtics. They lose 120 to 118. Of course, I'm your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? Here to help me break down what happened tonight in Atlanta, we got my best friend, co-host, and the coach of our podcast, the one and only Greg Manakis. Greg, interesting game. That's about all I got. Interesting game.
Yeah, man. It was like in the second quarter, the broadcast was just like completely clowning the game. Drew and Scal were just having way
All-star
too much
vibes,
fun.
preseason vibes.
Yeah, they're talking all this nonsense, and like when the broadcast is kind of in on the lack of seriousness from a team, it's just not a good look for anybody, man. Like I felt you could feel it the moment they flashed the and then I don't know if you could actually feel, maybe this is just me and how I interpret things, but when they flashed they started talking about, is it plus or minus 13,000 or minus 130,000 on the
Yeah,
broadcast? And I literally almost texted our buddies that still bet, because I don't bet. I was
yeah.
almost going to be like, hey, put $5 on the Hawks, because at least I would feel
By
good.
the way, I literally watched Seinfeld the other day where Kramer goes to Jerry. He's like, by the way, I put I put some money on the Knicks to win by 35 against the Pacers. And Jerry's like, why'd you do that? I didn't want to. He was like, well, Jerry, I can't do that. I have a gambling problem. You don't have a gambling problem.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, you could feel it in the second quarter. They let go of the rope a little bit, and they started taking some ridiculous shots, started taking like 30 footers when they didn't need to take 30 footers. The Hawks at one point just woke up. They were
Right.
sleepwalking through the first 16 minutes of the game, where the Celtics scored like 65 points in the first 16 minutes. Like absolutely ridiculous. I forget exactly what the stat was, but there's
Yeah.
a lot of points in a short amount of time. And Drew even called out on the broadcast Sam Hauser having like not missed a three in a while,
Yep.
and then Sam doesn't hit a three for the rest of the game. It's just one of those things where everything kind of came snowballing, and it was exactly how the Celtics' last win streak ended in the Dean Wade game.
Right.
This was the exact same thing. It just the comeback started a little bit sooner than it did in that game. But it's the same beats, of that comeback. Celtics get lackadaisical. They think the game is over. They're starting to get too good for their, too on their high horse, too big for their
Right.
britches, whatever cliche you want to use. And it's, hopefully they learn from this. It's not a big deal in the long run, but when this happens once every 10 games, 10% of the time, it is a little bit alarming.
Right. And so I was thinking from a coverage standpoint and us doing the show tonight post game, there's not really a good way for us to do this, right? Because I think there's one world where we could sit here and do the what is going on with this team? Why can't they finish? Why can't they put their foot on the gas and and cut them off at the throat or whatever? Why can't they? We could do that big overreaction that I don't think is probably truly authentic to how I feel. But also there's the other side of guys like where we clinched first place in the Eastern Conference last night. Why are we even giving this, the time of day? So what? It happened. It's one game. And while there's some truth to that side as well, too, I also think there are a few things that kind of caught my attention that, like they're not to you, what you just said, they're not nothing. And so it
Mhm.
leaves us in kind of this weird non-reaction, nor is it an overreaction, and we're going to probably fall somewhere in the middle on this. So I think it's going to be interesting for us to try to navigate what happens to that, because there's one thing you can't deny, right? You lose a 30-point lead, that's a bad loss. There's
Yeah,
that
it was a
that is
bad
that
loss.
that is inarguable. When you lose a 30-point lead, no matter the time, the place, the scenario, that is a bad loss. So this will probably fall in the category of, I'd have to think about it if it's the worst loss of the Celtics season, but it's up there, right? That it's gonna make. I mean, they only have 13 losses on the season. It's gonna make the top 5. I'll tell you that. Like that's gonna be certainly the case
Well,
for this.
Well, Dick Leip, the statistician for the Celtics broadcast, he had a tweet 13 minutes ago. This was the biggest blown lead in the NBA since Washington lost to the Clippers 116 to 115 on January 25th, 2022, after leading by 35. Back in 2003, Boston squandered a 29-point lead against Phoenix. So I'm assuming that means this is the biggest blown lead for the Celtics in a very long time,
Yeah.
having a 30-point lead. And yeah, I mean, it was definitely a bad loss, man. I was also thinking about how I wanted to kind of approach this post game because, people are tuning in and we're reacting for a reason. And I think one thing I want to talk about is late game execution first.
Yep. That's
So
gonna be the lead story, anyways. Let's go there.
yeah, let's get into it. So the Hawks ended up getting very physical with the Celtics. Jason Tatum had a great stat line, but there were times, especially in the fourth quarter, where I felt like he was letting physicality get the best of him. Obviously, he had that big monster dunk that you want to see more out of Tatum. You want to see that aggressiveness where it feels like he can do that anytime he wants, which is why he can be a frustrating player. You can't say Tatum settled for threes tonight. He didn't really settle for threes tonight. But then late in the game, they gave Jalen a couple possessions. They had that low angle pick and roll that he had the midi off of. And then he had another drive on Wesley Matthews where he pulled up for the elbow jumper. And then there's about 50 seconds left in the game. Celtics down 1. And you can tell the entire team is thinking 2 for 1, right? And they let the clock wind down. They don't run any action until like 9 seconds left on the shot clock. And they try and run that little action where Tatum comes off the high screen from Porzingis at the top, and the Hawks shut that down. They top blocked that, and Tatum kind of just waved to Jalen like, "Hey, go!"
Yeah.
With 5 seconds left.
I was gonna say there's under 5 seconds left. There's not really much of an option at that
But
point.
Will, it was a 2 for 1. You forgetting about that? It was a 2 for 1, and Jalen ends up taking a fadeaway 3 with Wes Matthews draped all over him. And the moment they started like slowing things down, I literally like exasperatedly yelled out, "Go!" Like, what are we doing waiting for this 2 for 1? You are losing the game. It does not matter if you get a 2 for 1 in this moment. Go score the fucking ball. And like, that's what frustrates me about analytics driven basketball and like basketball is math. It's like, you're losing the fucking game. You got to have the 2 for 1 does not matter if you don't have the lead, right? Go get the fucking lead. And they didn't execute in that moment. And those are those moments where, as a coach, I would be so goddamn frustrated with my players. And with my players, I'd also be looking at the coach like, is this what you want? You want the 2 for 1?
Right.
And it seems like that's what, if Joe didn't like it, he would have called a timeout. He would have been like, no, we got to get into this sooner. But he let them go. He had 19 seconds to call a timeout, and he didn't call a timeout. I'm not on the like Joe call a timeout thing. I'm more just talking about this is what he was okay with philosophically. He was okay with them running it down for the 2 for 1. If he wanted to get into the offense earlier, he would have called a timeout and said, let's run something, so that's what frustrated me. I don't believe in that bullshit. And now I'm getting upset.
There we go. Now we found the path. Like I said, we're gonna figure it out here on the fly here. I do think tonight was definitely a night Joe Mazzulla said, fuck it, I want them to figure it out on the fly. Like, I think there's definitely some times when the Hawks were making that massive run to close that 30-point gap midway through the third and stuff, where timeouts could have happened. And Joe was like, no, you guys are up 30. You guys need to figure this out. And so I do think there was a little bit of that from Joe Mazzulla. Nothing that I really want to stress tonight, but I do think once again at the end of games, and I think tonight, minus that 2 for 1, like you said, which is just like, and this was, we talked about the JJ Redick and LeBron podcast. They got into kind of the nonsense behind 2 for 1, at least, in different parts of the game. But I do think tonight they still ended up in a lot of ISO late, which I still think takes away the Celtics' biggest advantage, even though they certainly had some mismatches and advantages against this Hawks team that was depleted up and down the roster. Like, they still had ways to create advantages. So once again, we're nitpicking with this team because when they're already clinched first place and no one else has clinched a playoff spot, this is what you do. We have to nitpick. Like, this is all we can do. And so I still think, and I go back to that Steve Jones interview, when the Celtics put the full weight of their talent, even without Derek White and without Drew Holiday tonight. You still have more talent than the Hawks, who are also without Trae Young, a bunch of other guys as well. When you go ISO, you just give them more of an opportunity. And I thought Scal made a good point. I want to say there was maybe about 2 minutes left or so, and Tatum had an ISO, but he got it like about 16, 17 feet from the basket. And he was able to go a little bit quicker, and he had a few more options, got a great shot. The couple of times that him and Jalen were ISOing and they were kind of doing it from a few feet behind the 3-point line, you just have so many set players and no one's moving, and the defense has time to react. And I think outside of even just the last couple minutes, that was part of the issue of how the Hawks got back into this game. Just a bunch of lazy shots with nobody moving, and the Hawks able to get rebounds, and bad offense for the Celtics created good offense for the Hawks. That was a big theme in the second half. But late, I just think that is still one of the issues, that even when the Celtics get okay to good looks in those last minute and a half specifically, they're bailing other teams out by giving them the opportunity to be able to, crash the paint, be able to have people leaking in, and there just needs to be more movement. And then your point, when they did try to run a play in that 2-for-1, like you got to have something else other than Jalen Harris under 5 seconds. Like, good luck. You know what I mean? So
And also, it's like the way that they set up that play, it's Jaylen Brown on the left side of on the right side of the court, like needing to go to his left hand. Like, if anything, you want Jalen on the left side of the court so he can go to his right hand. And it's just like the setup of that play, just dribble the clock out for literally Jalen had the ball for the entire possession. Like, there was not one pass made. And it was just like a really frustrating possession, man, because there's so many things that this team can do. They can, like Scal was calling it out in the broadcast. Like, why don't we go to that empty side low angle pick and roll more? Right. And
yeah, that was a beautiful play that felt like, oh, hey, that's probably there every single time.
And the Celtics do like to go to it, right? Peyton Pritchard can get into it. Derek White gets into it. They almost like back their guy down from the from like the extended area down to the corner so they can get that good angle there. But the Celtics just like weren't really intentional with anything that they were doing in the second half. And I think part of the credit goes to the Hawks game plan. The Hawks game plan was to make the Celtics play in isolation, to run them off the 3-point line. Celtics only shot 38 3-pointers tonight. They were 11 for 38 from 3 tonight. Only made one 3-pointer in the second half.
In the second half.
One for 15 in the second half. And Sam missed a lot of those. Like, a lot of those were like wide open Sam Hauser threes. So,
he was 2 of 10 for Sam tonight.
Yeah, the Celtics were still getting good shots in the second half, but they went ice cold. They went ice cold in the third quarter at the worst time they could have gone ice cold. And then, the momentum's all on the Hawks side. DeJounte Murray's doing his thing. Bogdanovic's doing his thing. Krejci's doing his thing. I was like, what is that, a Boston Bruins player?
Dude,
I've
been waiting to make that joke. David Krejci, multi-sport athlete out here, knocking down 3-point shots in Atlanta. Yeah.
Giving me some serious Andrei Kirilenko vibes. Krejci was just out there killing it. And the Celtics just like, they can get spoiled child syndrome, I think, as a team, when things start going wrong for them. They all kind of have bad body language. They're looking for somebody to bail them out. They're pitching to the refs. Yeah, and it's just like it's a very frustrating team to watch when things don't go their way.
Right.
I was actually thinking about like how negatively I felt coming on to this broadcast tonight. And, a few years back, the first half of the Ime era in Boston, we felt negatively half the time. The Celtics were 500 playing 500.
People
basketball.
Forget that when whoever doesn't still like Mazzulla and still waxes poetically about Ime as a coach forgets just how rough it was for those first 45 to 50 games under Ime. And
it was not good for my emotional stability to every other game to be feeling like one type of way or the other. And with this, I'm like, you know what? This happens once every 10 games. The Celtics, it was twice every 10 games, where the Celtics have an 800 winning percentage. They literally win 80% of their games. So it is a little bit better for my emotional stability that we can come on here and talk it through, best friends, just talking through their favorite team, shit in the bed every once in a while.
I mean, shit in the bed is definitely the way to describe this game. And so here's something that I want to move to, and you've brought it up a couple times, and it definitely flipped specifically in that second half. And this is something that I think worries me a little bit when I think about some of the postseason matchups. Is the Hawks just came out and played tough. right? Like
Mhm.
they played that style that we've talked about and we've seen the Celtics get in trouble with Miami in the past couple years. And you think about some of the postseason matchups, like it took the Hawks as much as I know you were kind of annoyed by some of the stuff like Drew and Scal were like, this is a preseason game, but I mean, to me, I kind of agree with them. It had a very weird feel to it. And the Hawks lost a bunch of guys where the Celtics were getting easy open layups like you would in an all-star game. Second half, they came out. DeJounte Murray was getting up. DeJounte Murray, I thought, was going to like push Peyton Pritchard like all the way back into the backcourt at one point. Tatum, they kept getting up under his skin. Even Porzingis, and this was even in the first half. This is something I'm now keeping my eye on. Is anytime that mismatch at the nail with him and a guard or a small forward, which seemed automatic earlier in the year, now feels like with this opened up physicality across the league, it's I'm certainly not back to the Porzingis mindset that I had with him in Dallas, but in Dallas, I specifically remember watching a bunch of games where he would get the ball, try to shoot over a 6'6" guy, and if they let him play physical and get up on him, I'd seen him get his shot blocked by guys that are 6'6" when he's 7'2", and it's not quite there, but you are noticing it more now. And so this Hawks team, came out, got really, really physical with this team, and the Celtics did not react positively. Mazzulla was asked about it post game and kind of shrugged it off as just like, yeah, we'll just learn from it. So he didn't seem overly concerned. But like I said, when you look at having to potentially play Miami in the first round, potentially having to play an Orlando Magic team that their tone is going to be set by Jalen Suggs and Jonathan Isaac, who aren't going to wait a half to get physical, having to play potentially the Knicks, who Josh Hart plays 48 minutes a game. If Julius Randle is back, if OG is back, Hartenstein's been awesome on defense. If Mitchell Robinson comes back, like that's a super physical team that plays hard from the start. Now I know the Celtics, when they're locked in, I feel relatively comfortable that they can match that. But if you slip for even a second, it's those type of teams that are gonna push the Celtics past the limits of what they want to do. And we always talk about them learning from years past. Can you close out the series in 5 instead of 6 or 7 so that we can preserve and when we get to a Nugget series where that's equal talent on the same playing field. And if you go 7, you want to have as much ammo in the tank as possible. Like that's a little bit worrying for me that this Hawks team came out and let's just be real, kind of punked the Celtics in the second half with just being more physical than them. Like a very simple thing of just physicality and sticking it to them.
Yeah, and Wes Matthews, he came on the court, they were clowning him. Drew Carter said, "Yeah, that Wes Matthews. He's been in the league for 15 years. It is that guy."
Did surprise me he's
And
been in the league that long. It's a long time.
and I made the comment the other day when we were talking about the Bucks and we were talking about the physicality, and I said that the new rules are giving some of the older, more physical defenders a second chance at a career, a second life in the NBA,
Right.
where Jay Crowder now has a chance to use his physicality to his advantage. Wes Matthews, who this is how Wes Matthews has been in the league this long, is he was a 3-and-D guy who's allowed to be very physical with guys like Jason Tatum in the past, and he was on his Pat Bev shit tonight, just following the shit out of Tatum, getting really physical with him, reaching in every time Tatum dribbled the ball. He was there trying to poke the ball away, and I think it's actually probably a good thing for the Celtics that these new rules have started now versus starting in the playoffs so that
Yeah.
they can start to adjust to how they might counter it when they go up against a team that just decides for 48 minutes, we're going to get super physical with you. Because that is the way to beat the Celtics, right? You can't give them rhythm dribbles. You have to get up in Tatum's grill the entire game. Every dribble has to be contested. And that's what the Hawks did in the second half. So, there's like a double-edged sword here, but I do think that with the Celtics, I'm hoping they can learn from this. I'm hoping that they go back and watch film. What's great about this is that they have another game in Atlanta against the Hawks. So it's almost times 2, another like playoff scenario
Right.
where you just blew a game you should have won. Another game against the same team. What adjustments do you make from game to game? And I fully expect the Celtics to take care of business against the Hawks in the next game. We're the better team. We have more talent. They're undermanned at this time. I'm sure Derek White will be back on the court. Maybe Drew Holiday will be back on the court. Who knows?
Yeah.
Drew's continued absence is obviously alarming, but it seems like he'll be back sooner rather than later. But I think the Celtics can learn a lot from this game. But that physicality thing is definitely an issue.
Yeah, I mean, that just jumped out to me just because I mean, it happened so quickly. I mean, honestly, like, I started
Hunter was
so
getting physical too.
yeah, dude, I started doing so I was cleaning up from we ate dinner before the game, and I was like, "Alright, I'll take care of the dishes at halftime." So I brought my laptop out, was doing the dishes, and I was, like, kinda half paying attention in the 3rd quarter. I looked up, I was like, "Oh, it's a 14-point game. Alright, this might end up turning out to be a ball game." Washed a couple more dishes, looked up, was like, "Oh, shit, it's an 8-point game. Okay, this is like I might need to start locking back into this game right now." And next thing you knew, the Celtics were in a one-basket game basically from midway through the 3rd all the way through the end of the game here in a really, really tight contest. So I think that is going to be something that's interesting to watch for here to see how the Celtics react. I thought Capella was very physical as well. That's another area
I mean,
where a
huge
little bit
offensive
concerning.
rebound at the end of the game, kicking it out to Hunter, who inexplicably shot
Yeah,
the
I have
three-pointer.
no idea why he shot that.
That
That
was great. Good
I
for him.
mean, yeah, I mean that's the definition of the no no yes type of shot right there. Um another guy I want to talk about here, just because I thought this was an interesting move from Joe, and we've talked about it before, as this could be his potential role on this team. Jaden Springer getting some fourth quarter minutes, plays 8 minutes in the fourth quarter. Joe injects him seemingly for some life, and he has some positive moments. And I think he's a young guy. I think you could see eventually when he brought Pritchard back, Springer had committed a couple of fouls where he was great, and then you committed the foul. And he was good on both possessions up until the very end. But what was your thoughts on getting number one, the coaching decision by Missoula to say we got to change this up, and I think Springer is the guy to do it because we've kind of been asking for that more in the O'Shea Brissett line. But when you guys have in and out of the lineup tonight, Springer was the guy that got that call. And then secondly, your thoughts on Springer tonight in this game?
I mean, he was great. I think he was a good game changer there. The Celtics were getting absolutely toasted in the pick and roll, and I think this is why they got Springer. Probably not for this year, but just to take a look at him as the ability to be an impactful on-ball defender in a pick and roll heavy league. I thought he did a really good job impacting the ball. Those fouls that you mentioned were issues, but the bigger issue was Jason Tatum drives the ball into two, kicks the ball out to a wide open Jaden Springer in the
Yeah.
corner, and there's just no chance that thing's going in. And that's when I think Missoula was like, okay, I can't have him in the game for the rest of the game. So I got to get him out soon. But those
Yeah.
are the moments where I think for Jaden Springer, he can really look at that moment and be like, shit, if I'm going to be on the court, I really need to shoot like
Yeah.
500 to
I
1,000
mean,
three
he
point.
had that
Just
nice
corner
coast to
threes, corner threes.
yeah,
That's it. That's all he
that
needs to
one
work
you
on.
could see a mile away, just like because he just had pretty right before that nice coast to coast drive where honestly, in my head, I was like, Jaden. My inner monologue was
Yeah,
Jaden. Okay, Jaden. All
right.
right. Like it
Attacking
was like
Dejounte Murray.
yeah, it was like 1 on 3. I was like, "All
Yeah.
right, maybe back that out a little bit." But yeah, you were hoping that maybe just the momentum of that transition bucket would roll over, but yeah, well, like you said, once it was him in that corner and not Hauser, who obviously struggled from 3 tonight, or it wasn't, Pritchard, who also struggled from 3 tonight, 1 for 5, even though he was 7 of 12 overall. That was certainly a big difference when you saw Tatum make that pass, had some, Semi Ojeleye flashbacks.
Oh yeah, yeah. But I mean, Springer once again. I don't want to rain on the kid's parade. I think he has a skill set that the Celtics were interested in, and that's why they got him. And I think he got on the court because of that skill set tonight and had a couple good moments. But he's not gonna see any meaningful time in the playoffs. I think this was a good
Yeah.
opportunity to just give him a chance in a regular season game where it could swing a regular season game, right? That's what Jaden Springer's going to be at this point in his career. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
that's
I
why
would.
that's why for me, it was more the Missoula move was the interesting part, right? Because I think that could be it won't be Jaden Springer, but that could be an O'Shea Brissett in a different, in a first or second round game at some point. Whereas we need some energy. I don't know what's up with this team, but we need something different. And
Right.
maybe it's O'Shea Brissett, right? So I just thought it was interesting that Missoula was, aware enough to go for that because this team needed to have someone who was just going to play their ass off, honestly, and get physical and fight back a little bit physically. And Springer's probably a little bit too ready to do that, and we saw that with some of those fouls. But I did think that was an interesting move from Missoula. Anything else that really stood out to you tonight, Greg? I mean, it's a 30
Starting
point
lineup.
lead. Starting lineup, yeah, that's a good one. Let's talk about that. Point Jays, no true traditional point guard here. Point Tatum, little bit of point Jalen, mostly point Tatum there in that starting lineup. What do you think about that move?
I thought it was Joe Mazzulla trying some stuff, which is what these last 10 games are going to be all about. It's just
Yeah.
trying some stuff, try out some different rotations. If you're thinking about going up against a behemoth team like the Nuggets or like the T-Wolves in the finals, right, where you might need to throw out a lineup that hasn't really got much time together. And I think this is a good opportunity, a good testing ground for you to say, okay, what will happen if we need to go Tatum, Brown, Hauser, Horford, Porzingis, just for like a 5-minute stretch. And it looked
Mhm.
good to start the game, but you saw the limitations of that towards the end of the half, where they just needed somebody out there who could get them into their offense. And Tatum, I thought, did a really good job early in the game facilitating, but I think, that's why they started Pritchard in the second half. Hauser went cold.
Right.
I think if Hauser stays hot throughout that game, they probably don't make that switch because the lead probably stays around 30 instead of getting down to 18 at the half. But you know, I thought it was fun. I thought it was fun to see that happen. I thought it
Well,
was
yeah, the
good
first half was a lot of fun.
yeah, I thought it was good for Tatum to get those reps at the point. He runs a lot of point guard anyway, but
Right.
just like having a true point guard on the court at all times with him, I think normally makes a big difference. I was surprised that Pritchard didn't get the start because he's been playing so well. But I think to your point about bringing somebody in that can kind of change the pace of a game, that's why they like Peyton Pritchard coming off the bench, is because he's a spark plug coming off the bench. So I think they wanted to keep him in that
Yeah.
role. And Pritchard had his moments tonight where he played really well again.
Yeah,
Um,
another good night for Pritchard. 15 points, 6 let me see, 5 rebounds, 6 assists for him. Another no turnover game. Like that's been one of the most impressive things. And we talked about this. Go back on our YouTube page here for us talking about Peyton Pritchard, the next Jalen Brunson. Watch for context, please. Watch for context. You'll see. Um,
We're trying to get better at some interesting titles.
yeah. Just trying to pique your interest, but you got to listen to the whole thing for it to make sense. But once again, that's just been, with Peyton Pritchard in this stretch of him getting, he didn't play 30 minutes tonight, played 28. But just him not turning the ball over and being kind of just a solid, steady point guard, in this stretch. And that's why, like you said, I think he goes back to him because if Sam's not, flamethrower Sam, then Peyton Pritchard's going to give you more out there on a night when you don't have Derek White, you don't have Drew Holiday. And then ultimately, once you realize, I got to have a guy out here that can shoot. I can't have Springer out here throwing up duds. Goes back to Pritchard, who had another solid night. So yeah, it's a disappointing loss. It's a bad loss, but at the end of the day, here's the thing: in this stretch where the Celtics are playing so many games against Pistons, Hawks, Wizards, a game like this was bound to happen. Did I think it would happen in this dramatic of a fashion? No, but at some point when you're playing the rest game with your top six and you're trying to get them ready for the playoffs and you're playing a bunch of teams that you're going to get big leads against and just human nature is going to take over, that you don't have the same focus that you come out with if that game doesn't stay close. This was bound to happen. This was bound to happen at some point. 30-point lead makes it look way worse, or it feels way worse than what it would be if it was just, we didn't have it tonight. Tonight was that one blip, but where it looked like you had it, and then you're the ones you contributed to this, to this letdown. It does make it feel worse. But at the end of the day, it's one game, and it's a team that, like I said, on March 24th, they wrapped up the 1 seed. No one else has technically qualified for the playoffs yet in the East. And the Celtics have wrapped up the 1 seed. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, I'm going to read you all of the Celtics losses this year because it's not going to take very long.
Yeah.
Um, Loss at Minnesota, 114 to 109 in overtime. But next game, loss at Philly, 106-103. About 8 games later, loss at Charlotte, 121 and 118 in overtime. That was one of the bad losses. A couple games later, at Orlando, loss 113 to 96. I can stop saying losses. I'm only naming the losses. December 4th at Indiana, 122-112. I think that was that Neesmith game.
Mm-hmm.
December 19th at Golden State, loss in overtime, 132 to 126.
Yep.
About 7 games later, at Oklahoma City, 127-123. 3 games later, at Indiana, 133-131.
Buddy healed head tap.
2 games later, the blowout in Milwaukee.
Yep.
4 games later, at Denver, 102-100. 4 games later, at home versus LA,
Yep.
115-96.
Denver game was at home too. Yeah.
That was that weird loss. The Denver game was at home. You're right. 2 games later, versus the Lakers, 114-105 at home. That was when the Celtics, that was right before the All-Star break when they started playing a little bad. And then they go on their crazy win streak, lose the Dean Wade game at Denver, back-to-back games, go on another crazy win streak, lose at Atlanta. So, like, that took me, 1 minute to name all those losses while giving you all the dates and all the scores.
And
We're
the
okay,
crazy
guys.
part
We're
is,
okay.
I bet you, and I wish we had done this, it's too late now, but I probably could have named all those because that's how rare it is, right? That they and I think Tatum might have said this, like, they lose so rarely that it feels worse than it is when it does happen, right?
Yeah, especially
So
when it's against the fucking Hawks when you have a 30-point lead.
exactly, and there's no Trae Young, and there's no they were out with the Noah Kongwu. They had a bunch of guys that were out tonight.
No Jalen Johnson.
No Jalen Johnson. That's what I was trying to think of. Thank you. Yeah. So, at the end of the day, guys, let's go with the route of, listen, we've expressed our concerns, physicality and late game. I think late game execution. Those are the two things from this that I do think matter, and at least I'm going to think about and continue to watch as the season goes on. But the loss itself, let's just be done with it. Dirt off your shoulder. Dirt off our shoulder. We're rolling on. And Greg, as you said, great little playoff scenario here. 2 days later, this is very much a scenario that could happen in the first round.
Literally
Celtics
could play the Hawks.
Literally could play the Hawks. Celtics blow a game they're not supposed to. And I mean, we've seen this happen all the time, especially in round one of playoff series. We see the lower seeded team come out with an urgency that top seed team doesn't have. And maybe they steal game one, or they get game 3 at home on their home court. Now you're like, oh, it's 2-1 now. Could have been 3-0 if the Celtics just, put this to bed. But now we get to see how the Celtics respond in Atlanta. They got 2 days off. We'll see who's on the injury report or not. Maybe they'll get a couple guys back. Maybe this is a message where it's like, all right, well, Derek, Drew, if you guys are ready to go, everybody's fucking playing. We're going playoff rotation in this game tonight, and we're going to send a message that this is not happening to this team. So Thursday night will be a fun time to see how the Celtics respond. We'll check it out. We'll have a preview for you guys of that game because that game is on Thursday. We'll be doing our live stream on YouTube and Twitter, 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central. We'll have the 3-man weave in effect. We will have a preview of that game. We'll probably hit another topic or two. And of course, bring a friend, bring some questions. We want to make those interactive as much as we possibly can. So if you have concerns about the Celtics and their late game execution or their physicality or whatever it may be, bring that to the live stream. We'll be happy to answer those questions. But for tonight, that's going to do it. Is what it is. Hawks take down the Celtics 120-118. We'll be back at it on Thursday. Any final words here, Greg, before we send them off with some sweet, sweet Black Sheep Optimus?
No, you can play the sweet, sweet Black Sheep Optimus.
All right, we're going to do it for y'all. Peace.
Every time I get this high, I lose my mind. It don't take much no more until I hit the floor. Every time I get this high, it's you I find. It don't take much no more until I'm at your door.
You cut me to my core, baby. What can I say? You got me on the floor, you know I came to play. I know I shouldn't, but you seem to take my pain away. And every time I score, Jason Tatum fade away. I close my eyes and I'm floating your river. I caught a